So, what are we talking about today? We're talking about programmatic layout. How to set up your views using code and not storyboard, right? For the last 4 units or so, we've been using storyboard to lay out our views. So today we'll take a look at how to lay out our views 100% in code. So the objectives of the day, at the end of this lesson, you should be able to create a programmatic view using code and not storyboard, right? You should be comfortable or more comfortable using the scene delegate to set up your layout, right? This is what we'll see. You should be comfortable or know the differences between pre-iOS 13 setup and iOS 13 setup, right? So before iOS 13, all our layout was done in the app delegate. As of iOS 13 and iPad OS and all those changes, now we have the scene delegate. So those are some of the things we aiming towards, right? Some of the objectives of the day, right? So with that said, let's go to Xcode and create a new project. In keeping with past demos and past APIs, whatever we do, we will name this project based on what we're doing. So the name of the project will be Programmatic UI. So we're creating a single view application. It's an Xcode project. Single view app. It's a single view app. And the name of the application we said will be Programmatic UI, right? So when you go back to your notes, you'll see the first introduction that you did with setting up views programmatically. As we're going through the process, please take your own notes. I'll make it my best to write notes here as to what we're doing to achieve it. But please, your own notes is always better, right? You seeing your own notes, it brings you back to that exact moment that you wrote the thing, and it will make more, there'll be more context there. So, name of the project, Programmatic UI. And we click Create. And select your simulator for now, right? Select your simulator and run the app, and we'll see our basic white screen get shown up here. Okay, so that's our standard application. We haven't changed anything. When our application runs, it defaults to a white screen. And let's walk through what the app has, right? So first file you have in your app is the app delegate, right? Let me take this up a little bit up here. First file here. Okay, perfect. So the first file we encounter is the app delegate. The app delegate has this function called did finish launching with options, right? Let's go ahead and put a breakpoint right there at line 18. So this is the first function that gets called. Again, it's a delegate, right? Delegate. So as I said, delegation is all around iOS. So here we have the app delegate. The app delegate has different functions on it that gets called based on activities, right? So this function gets called when the app launches. First function that gets called when your app launches. So there you could do setup code here. Back in pre-iOS 13, this is where we could start writing notes. So pre-iOS 13, this is where we set up our programmatic we could say UI and view hierarchy. Right? So pre-iOS 13, this is where we did our setup code, right? So if your app has a view controller and you're doing everything programmatic, this is where you would do it pre-iOS 13, right? So the app launches, there's a window. Well, there's no window property anymore, but there used to be a window property. This is, well, again, pre-iOS 13. The window property for the app was here in the update. Right? So before iOS 13, there was a property here, window of type UI window, and it wasn't optional. Right? And again, we're talking about programmatic UI here. If you did any storyboards, there was no reason to come here and do any configuration, okay? Right? This is talking about if you want to set up your app using programmatic code, this is where you would come and this is where you would do it. You would do the setup code in the did finish launching with options, right? Okay, we'll talk about what window is and later when we get into the scene delegate. Okay, let's move over to the scene delegate now. And look at that, that's where our window is now, right? So the window we just mentioned earlier, this is where the window property lives now. It lives in what's known as the scene delegate. Before iOS 13, there was no scene delegate. Scene delegate, let's talk about it a little bit. Scene delegate gives iPad apps the ability to have multiple windows on an app, right? iOS apps don't have multiple windows, but iPad OS apps have multiple windows. So you could have multiple scenes, okay? So the logic that we spoke about, the code logic, if you want to set up your code, if you want to set up your UI or your app in code, this is where you come to do it. Here you have on line 13, you have a window. An app has a window. Every app has a window. The window is the first, call it view of that app, right? The container. Think about it like the container of the application. And that window has a property on it called root view controller. So every window needs a root view controller. If it doesn't have a root view controller, it will render black because there's nothing there. We'll see what that looks like. But this is where our property is now. In iOS 13, our window property is in the scene delegate. This is why we come here to set up our UI logic. Because to set up your UI logic, you need to get access to the window for the app. In our case, iOS apps have one window, right? So one window property, that window property gets its root view controller property gets set to whatever your view controller is. Okay, so here iOS 13, now has a scene delegate this is where the window property is. This window, in order to set up your programmatic UI code, you must set the root view controller property of the window. Example, window.root view controller equal to some view controller. Okay? Yes, sir.
Is this where, like, actually, that would be a fun part.
We're just working up to where we headed, but we're trying to build up the context for where we're going.
I was just trying to, like, get together, because remember when we did the balance for the collection view, how we determined the width of the phone?
Yeah. So you have to give the window some, yes.
Right.
We have to do all that setup there.
But this is where that information is stored.
Yes, exactly. So now we're saying storyboard, we're not using you anymore. We need to do everything programmatic, right? We need to tell the app itself exactly what's going on, what is your root view controller, everything. A bit similar to what we did when we subclassed UI tab bar controller, right? At some point, storyboard was taking care of the tab bar controller, but we said, okay, we want to do the work ourselves. So we subclassed it, and we gave it its view controllers, and then we gave it some extra logic. We injected it with the data persistence properties, right? So whenever you want to get deeper down, you have to start writing more code, right? To take more control, customize what you want to do. Very good. Okay, that takes us into the big steps of setting up or getting rid of storyboard. So steps in removing the default main storyboard file. Steps in removing the default main storyboard file. We do not have to necessarily remove the storyboard file here, like delete it, but we need to remove it from the info plist so that the info plist doesn't anymore try to look for that storyboard file by default. So, steps in removing the default storyboard file from the info.plist file, from the info.plist. Step one, we'll delete the main entry, main storyboard entry. From the info plist. And then we will also delete the storyboard value from the scene configuration. Okay? And to make it 100% sure that we are doing everything programmatic, we'll go ahead, we'll delete the main.storyboard file. So we'll go through those. I'm sorry? Yeah, that's optional step. So we could put optional here. Very good. And at some point this week or next week, I want to show us how to create, when we get more comfortable with programmatic UI, I want to show us how to create our own storyboards. That way we could mix and match earlier before the group project starts. Yes?
Is it okay to keep the, like, is it common to want to use the storyboard to see how you visually want to set up?
For now, we will remove everything because we're not doing visually anything today. Okay? All right. But yes, your designer likes to see visual, especially like a designer wants to see how things look before. But for today, we have no designer. We're doing everything in code, and we'll be running to see how it looks. Cool? Very good. Cool. That's why so we had storyboards, to take a slight tangent here, not really tangent. We had storyboard, either storyboard or code, or mix and match we had before, right? Or now with UI Kit. But as of SwiftUI, you have both. You could code and you could see the UI at the same time, okay? Right? There's no like rerunning the app. You have a preview of what you coded right next to you, That's SwiftUI. UI Kit, you have storyboard, and you have code separately, right? You could mix and match them, but as you code, you're not seeing the UI changes. Everybody with me? So as of iOS 13, again, we have SwiftUI. And SwiftUI, I code on one left pane. On my right pane, I have a preview window. So as I'm coding, I'm seeing changes. And as I'm changing the actual view, my code changes, right? But UI Kit is not going away. It's fundamental. It's been around since iOS began. So SwiftUI is new, but that's like where we headed. That's where the future is, right? So when we ask ourselves those questions about, do we have to rerun the app every time? Yes, with UI Kit we do, right? But SwiftUI, no. You have preview, right? Preview, you type, it just works. It just renders, right? Still a bit buggy, but it's getting there. As of iOS 14, it should be more stable, but that's where we headed. That's where the future of iOS development is, right? Faster, easier for your designer to see the thing right away, and who knows, the designer plays around with the UI and then code is being written. It's a beautiful thing. What's that? Who, me? No, I'm not. It's a beautiful thing. It's awesome. I mean, when you see a table view rendered in SwiftUI, it's one line of code, or 2 lines of code, depending on what you do. There's no delegate, there's nothing there. You see a list and you give it some array and it's done. It's beautiful. Yeah, but UI Kit is not going away. So that's why we're doing UI Kit here. I mean, there's still a lot you have to do. There's never 100% just magic, right? Yeah, exactly. Right, even with drag and drop, you still have to do things, right? When you start off, you see, oh, drag and drop, I'm done. But no, you have to do code in that area where you drop the thing. Yeah, exactly. All right, so we spoke about the steps in removing the default main storyboard. Let's go ahead and do that. So let's go over to our info plist. We're not removing our info plist, right? Be careful there. Let me zoom in here and see what's going on. So we have a main storyboard file here. Do we see that? Where it says main storyboard file base name? Do we all see that? We all should have that by default, yes? Okay, so go ahead and remove that key by clicking on the delete button, the minus button. Click on the minus button to remove it. And let's go to, where's the scene? Do we see application scene manifest? Open it up. Do we see scene configuration? Open that up. Do we see application session? Sorry, yeah, application session role. Open that up. Do we see item? Open that up. We'll get where we want to get to. Do we see storyboard name? Okay, so remove that value. Just remove it with the minus sign. Yes? Cool. All right, so I think we are good here. Let me zoom back out. All right, let's go over to the top of our project where it says Programmatic UI in the navigation window there. Okay. And let's go to where it says, do you see main interface? Let me zoom in here. Do we see main interface? In the middle, right where it says deployment info. Just remove that main interface here. Press enter.
I had nothing there to begin with.
It shouldn't have been there, but mine did not revert here. Let me build this to make sure. Yeah, when you removed it, it should have removed it already. Do we still have one? Yeah, it should be empty. I don't know why mine did not propagate, but it should have been empty when I did my deletion. Okay, build, make sure you have no errors at this point. Build and make sure you have no errors.
Sorry, where's
At the top of the Programmatic UI, click on it and verify that you don't have a main interface. If there is one, just delete it and press enter. Yes?
Oh, okay, I'm assuming that is this because of the test? Oh, okay, never mind.
No test, right? Today. Okay, so build and make sure you have no errors. Breakpoint.
You need to tell us what a breakpoint.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, we do have the breakpoint still. Move the breakpoint for now and run the app. If you have a breakpoint in your did finish launching, remove it. Okay. My screen should be black. Is your screen black?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, let me verify something there. I walked everybody through it, but something did not stick. Oh, I did not delete the thing. That makes sense. Right? So verify, if it's white, it shouldn't be white.
It's black now.
Right? So if it is white, go back and verify that your storyboard name is actually gone by deleting it. Okay? Yes? Okay, cool. Perfect. Now, if I run my app again, should get a black screen at this point. Right? So there we go. So what's happening here? Right now, there's no storyboard. There's nothing there. When I run it, I have a blank window. Okay? Everybody? I want to make sure everybody has a black window before we continue. Yes, Benito? Double check in your info plist and go back to. I'm sorry? Okay. Okay, cool. Verify your info plist and verify you remove the main storyboard and also the scene configuration, you remove the storyboard name there. Those are the two things we did, right? So we came here, we removed the main storyboard file, then we went inside of our application scene manifest and we removed the storyboard name. How are we doing?
Wait, where's the main storyboard on?
Tanya, how you doing? Good? Okay. Lilia, how you doing? Good? Black screen? Okay. Chelsea? All right, so let us continue on. So now let's continue. Let us continue. Yulia, good?
How to verify my screen is white? Is it what I need or?
No, it shouldn't be white, it should be black. Yeah. Meaning you got rid of the storyboard. So right now we have no UI. Okay, so now let's go back to our scene delegate. We haven't done any code in our scene delegate. We've only written notes. Let's verify if we need to change anything here. We said we deleted the main storyboard entry, step 1. Step 2, we removed the storyboard value or the storyboard name value from the scene configuration, right? And step 3, we said we'll just go ahead and delete the actual storyboard file, main.storyboard. Yes? We haven't done that yet. So let's pay attention here. We have a main storyboard here. Let us remove it. Right click on it, delete, and move to trash. Move to trash, right? Run your app again. Right? Run your app again, verify there's no errors, nothing else. Because at this point, you have no storyboard file. It should not be looking for the main.storyboard. Everybody with me? We removed it from the info plist. No longer is the info plist looking for the main.storyboard. Right? So now we're completely on our own. We need to create some sort of UI or some view controller, instantiate the root view controller, as we said earlier. So let's go back to the scene delegate. Right? So we said we have a window property. Great, we have that. On that window property, we said we need to set the root view controller of that window. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so if we go down, 1 second. We'll get there. I don't want to jump ahead of the ship, right? But yes, you could set up your navigation controller, tab bar controller, anything you want. You could do it in code. Exactly, exactly. So let's move to the first delegate method on our scene delegate, where we want to do the setup code, right? So here it tells you, use this method optionally configure and attach the window to the provided window scene. Here we have a window scene property. It's using the guard statement. So if from here on, if we want to do anything in code, we have to do the setup logic in the scene will connect to session, right? So your app delegate gets called first. It still gets called first. Let's actually put breakpoints there to confirm that. So my app delegate, I'll put a breakpoint right inside my function for the did finish launching with options. And remember, we have no window here in the app delegate. We're not setting up, or we cannot set up our root view controller here. There's no more window. If you're looking at code pre-iOS 13, this is where you do it, because you have a window. Everybody with me? Questions about that? Questions about that? App delegate, no window property, right? Where the window property is, this is where we need to do our setup code, right? Okay, we haven't done any setup code yet, but I'm just going through where we do things. So we put a breakpoint in the did finish launching with options. We wrote some notes here. We said pre-iOS 13, window property for the app was here in the app delegate. And we said this is where we set up our programmatic UI pre-iOS 13, right? iOS 12, 11, and so forth. Go to scene delegate and put a breakpoint right at line 30. So right now we have two delegates we're talking about. App delegate and we have scene delegate. Our code will be going where? Scene delegate. If you're working with iOS 12 or before, where does your code go? App delegate, because you have no scene delegate period, right? There will be no scene delegate if you have some older iOS app. Like if you fork an older project in lab, take a look again and see if that exists, right? If it exists, that means we updated the project. If we haven't updated the project, there will be no scene delegate, okay? All right, so we put a breakpoint here. Let's run the app, and let's see what's happening. So, as we said, the first function still is did finish launching with options. Do we see that? That's where our breakpoint is. If we keep running our code, second breakpoint is where? In the scene delegate, right? But here, this is where we have the window. So where we have the window is where we will set up our code, okay? All right, awesome. And there's more functions we'll talk about as we get further in, but I don't want to talk about all those functions right now. But you could take a look at them off and on and see what's going on. But there's functions, all those are delegate functions, like it listens to the application, the state of the application. The application is active. This function gets called. It resigned, like I went to the home screen. I entered the foreground. There's different functions we'll come and talk about as we come through them, okay, everybody? But remember, those are delegate methods, and delegate methods are awesome because they let you know when an event happened, right? So as we see in delegate methods here, we'll be more aware of what's happening. But the context will become more apparent as you get further in. Like for example, maybe your user is logging in Facebook. And then after Facebook, they come back to your app. At that point, you want to see where they are or what state they're in and put them into the right state, right? If your application went in the background, maybe you have a music app, right? And maybe you want to keep playing, whatever it is. There's a function for that there. But the objective of the day is just to set up code, to set up our UI using code. So what do we need to do? First step, let's actually write that out. So steps in setting or configuring, steps in configuring programmatic UI in the scene delegate. Okay, so here Apple is using an underscore because they're not using, for example, if you're using storyboard, there's no reason why you want to get access to the window, so there's no variable there. And again, in your own code, if you want to silence, in your own code, if you want to silence some property, for example, if I have Windows scene in here and I build my app, it will give me a warning, right? So we know to silence a warning, we put an underscore, right? Yes? So that's what Apple did. But now we are using this property, so we call it Windows scene. We call it window scene because we need access to the window scene in order to configure our window. Steps in configuring programmatic UI in the scene delegate. I'll also say steps in configuring the window property. Okay? Great. What is the current value of our window? It's nil, right? Because here it says var window, UI window, question mark. What does that mean? That means window equal nil, right? And this is a class. It doesn't give us any errors because window has a value of nil, right? It has some nil value. So we need to go ahead and set up. Let's first set up the window. I think, Christian, earlier you were saying in our collection view, we needed to give the collection view some sort of size or whatever it was that you said, some bounds. We need to do the same thing here with the window. We need to tell the window, go ahead and set up your frame to take the entire device's size, right? So I need to set up the frame of the window. Here, I'll say that. So set up the windows frame to be the entire device's screen, or to take up. Set up the Windows frame to right? I want that window to be the entire screen of the device, right? So here I want to set up, now I'm instantiating my window with some property, with some value. So I'll also say instantiating the window with a frame. Okay. How are we going to do that? We'll say UI window. We'll say UI window, and we'll use frame here. I think that's the first time we're really using frame, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. First time we're using frame, kind of, right? So here we're using frame, and the frame takes in a CG rect. What's a CG rect? A CG rect, core graphics, CG stands for core graphics, rectangle. It takes in a rectangle. The rectangle has an X and Y value, right? An origin, X and Y are the first two parameters, and it has a width and a height, right? So a rectangle, any frame, think of a frame as a rectangle. Any rectangle has an origin and it has a size, right? So that's what CG rect is. A frame of a view is its origin and its size, right? So here we'll say CG rect, and for the rect, we could pass in individual values, but there's a better way. We could pass in some individual values. We could say 0, 0, and something else for the width and the height, but there's a better way to do that. Anybody want to point us there? I think we use this in collection view. Greg?
Maybe UI screen dot frame dot size.
UI screen, right? We have that singleton UI screen dot main. So we'll use it. UI screen dot main returns the device's current configuration, right? So regardless if it's an iPad, Apple Watch, TV OS, doesn't matter. It returns the size of the device, or it has the device's properties. So as Greg says, we'll say UI screen dot main right? And as we said with collection views, it returns the screen object representing the device's screen, right? So it doesn't matter 5S, 4S, 3GS, which I rebooted over the weekend, 8 plus, doesn't matter, right? So here we have our singleton main. On main, we'll say bounds. And look at bounds. What's bounds' data type? It's a CG rect. So it has all those 4 values in there. The bounds represents all 4 values. It has origin, right, which is X and Y. origin is X and Y, and it has a size. A size is width and height. Yes, sir?
You say origin is X and Y, is that like the anchor?
Yes, think about it as the anchor where that object starts drawing itself. In our case, we want it to be 0, 0. Cool? 0, 0 represents the top left edge of the device. So, bounds, great. Perfect. So here we have a window, perfect. So we instantiated our window with a frame. Now our window has some sort of frame. It has the entire device. Awesome. Next up, we'll say window. The window now needs a scene. Right? The window needs a scene. And again, as I said, iOS 13, now there's different properties, different configurations. A window needs an initial scene. What is my scene going to be? We have the scene. We have the God let window scene there on line 34, right? So we have the scene, which is representing the scene delegate. So here we'll instantiate it with window scene. So now the window has a scene, and the scene itself has its delegate properties or delegate methods that it could respond to. Yes?
So about the rec stuff, didn't we do something similar with the
Collection views.
with the resizing or
Yeah, collection views. Before even resizing with the image picker.
that's what I was thinking. I remember using like bounds to like
Yeah, for the rect, right? Yes, we also did that there. But I think the first time we did it was collection views.
how did we use it in collection views?
When we decided the width of it.
Oh.
We said UI screen, main bound size width. Cool?
But that was in the image picker.
Oh yes, so same thing. Did we do collection views before?
Yeah, but I don't
Yeah,
think
we-
we did that far. Well, I'm
The
looking-
collection views with the flags.
Yeah, yeah. And the dogs. Thank you, sir. I'm stirring to the rescue again. So dog, random dogs, right? We did the width of it because we had 2 items or 2 cells. Awesome. So here, first step, we did our frames for the window. Now the window has a scene. Great, making progress. Let's go on. We said, what else did we say that the window needs? In our notes, we wrote it. In our notes, we said the window needs something.
Oh, a
Root view controller, right? So the window needs a root view controller. Let's give it a root view controller. So we'll say window dot root view controller. We have one view controller that exists. We'll give it that view controller. View controller. Okay. So the window is pretty much configured. One more step, we need to make it visible. So here we'll say window dot make key and visible. Make the window now visible on screen. Render the window onto the screen. That's the last step. Not much, right? Like it's 4 lines of code to get your code set up. Now let's verify that it actually gets to the view controller. We'll put a breakpoint. Actually, we'll just change the color. We'll change the color of our view controller. In view did load, for people that's finished typing, go to your view did load. In there, give it a color. Give the view background some color, right? So view that background color equal to some color that you choose. And run the app again and verify that it does show not a black screen anymore, but that the color you chose. Are we done typing? Can we move? Luba? Yes, sir.
Can you define like what the root view controller actually is in terms of?
Same as think of a navigation controller having a root view controller, the first view controller it has.
Oh, just like where it
Yeah, yeah. Just give me some view controller for me to start with, right? My base view controller. In the example, if you have a tab bar controller app, it would be a tab bar controller here.
So it's not like a class or anything. It's just like defining which one is like.
Exactly. Like what's my start? What's my entry point? Think about it like the entry point of the app. Like that arrow you have in storyboard, that's the root view controller. Everybody? Good question there. Right? So the root view controller is that arrow you have in storyboard. Which one is the first view controller that I see? Is it a navigation controller? Is it a tab bar controller, or is it a regular view controller? Like in our case right now, it's a regular view controller. Okay, so we said move on to our view controller. In our view did load, give the view some background color. Let's get used to using system colors, actually. I'll say system orange
Wow.
for dark mode.
For the dark mode?
Yeah, for dark mode, to make it dark mode compatible. Right, because if I say orange, orange is fine, but if I say some color that doesn't exactly support dark mode, it won't render your fonts or whatever the same color, right? So again, iOS 13, I feel like so many iOS 13 things here. System colors is new in iOS 13, very similar to SF symbols. So it's dark mode ready, as opposed to saying .orange, which is not dark mode ready. So you want to use semantic colors where you can. Cool? Very good. So let's run that. If everything goes correctly, we should have orange coming up. Well, remove the breakpoint here. Right? So, step one we did. Did everybody confirm that the color changed? No. What? You have black, right? So verify back in your scene delegate. Verify back in your scene delegate that you have those 4 steps. 38, line 38, you set up the window frame. Line 39, you give it a window scene. Line 40, you give it a root view controller. Line 41, you said make that window visible. Right? What color is your, make sure your view did load, put a breakpoint in your view did load, make sure it gets called. But Aaron got you now. Anybody else not seeing the color? Awesome, so everybody sees the color, great, great, great. Okay, any questions about what we just did? Yes, sir.
So, I get that we're making it visible. How are we making it key? What does that mean?
That's just basically saying this is the key window, there's one window, make that key window visible on screen. That's it. Okay. Yes?
What's the window scene?
The window scene is this actual scene delegate here. You give in the window, the scene delegate basically. Now listen for changes on that window. The functions, the protocol functions here will get called on that window. For example, if my app goes in the background, this is the delegates, yes.
The UI window.
It's almost like it's almost like, hey, table view dot delegate equals self
So it listens
for changes on the app.
okay.
That will get further in later, right? Like, so your app goes into the background, you want to listen to changes for that. When it comes back to the foreground, maybe you want to show a splash screen or whatever it is. Cool?
Alex,
Yes, sir.
the window.rootView controller, does that establish the root view controller?
The entry point of the app.
The app or just this particular window?
The entry point of the app,
Okay.
right? The entry point of the app. So actually, let's just test it out. Let's create a next view controller. Create a new view controller, and let's call it, for lack of a better word, just call it second view controller. Actually, no, call it settings view controller because that's where we headed. Call it settings view controller. Let me zoom that in. It's called settings view controller. And create. And in our settings view controller, give it a different color. In your view did load, give it a different color. That's not orange or the color that you chose. Background color, go to system, yellow. Okay, now to answer your question, Greg, we'll change visualize storyboard, and you're moving the arrow from the view controller to the settings view controller. We'll do that in code, right? So now instead, have we done that? Created a new view controller, call it settings view controller, and change the background color? Okay, let's go back to the scene delegate. In the scene delegate, let's now change this view controller here to settings view controller. And a different color should show up because now a different view controller is that initial entry point. Right? Everybody? Confirm that? Yes.
So does it mean like the window kind of encapsulates the whole app?
Yes.
So it's the window for the app?
Exactly.
Not just the view controller?
Exactly.
Okay.
Very good. So what Greg is doing there is confirming his questions and writing them down, because that's like, right, we see something new, we want to make sure that there's no ambiguity with what we're seeing. All right, cool. There was a next question that was proposed by Amini, right? If I want to have my view controller in a navigation controller, what do I do? Okay, we'll answer that. We'll answer that and then we'll take a short break. So, if we want to embed, should I just comment this out and redo it? I'll just comment this out here, and I'll put a new comment in here, embedding a view controller, embedding the UI view controller in a UI navigation controller. Okay? So this is a minute's question here. Let's go ahead and do so. So again, it's window, root view controller. Imini says she wants to go to storyboard and click on the embedding, right? Visualize here. Click on the embedding. I want to embed my view controller in a navigation controller. How do we do it in code? We start off by saying UI navigation controller. This guy also has a root view controller, which makes sense because by itself, it's nothing, right? Yes? So now I need to say, Mr. UI navigation controller, I want to give you a root view controller of my view controller. Okay? So here we're using the UI navigation controller initializer that takes in a root view controller. And the root view controller, we give it whatever controller we want, right? In that case, we gave it the view controller. Everybody? Now let's go ahead and run the app. Look at that. Now we have a navigation controller. How do we know we're in a navigation controller? We have the nav bar, right? Cool? Not that difficult, right? Code is nice, right? You write what you want and it happens. Yes? Question? Yes? Well, those exist, right?
No, I mean, like, we don't have the main storyboard anymore, so we'll be able to shoot the controller with that main storyboard.
Yes. Remember the same code we did where we said, if you have a storyboard file, I'm not even going to show that now. I'm tempted, but I don't want to distract us. But if you have a storyboard file with a storyboard, you could grab that storyboard into your code using the same instantiate view controller with ID and make it your root view controller. Okay? But as we get more familiar with this, we'll add that more, that other part there. But I don't want to put everything on the first day. Does that make sense? But yes, with code, you could grab storyboard, you could grab code, it doesn't matter. You have more power, really. Cool? Yes, sir?
I'm just curious, what takes precedence, the code or?
Code. Very good. Good question. What takes precedence? If in my storyboard, I say text color is blue. Right, everybody? Greg's question was what takes precedence? Is it code or storyboard? In my storyboard, if I say my text color is blue, in storyboard, the attributes, and I come to my code, I say in view did load, text color is green. What is the after effect? It's green, right? Because what happens is your view controller runs, it has an init with coder initializer that gets the storyboard. After my initializer gets called, then my view lifecycle methods gets called. So that's why the change happens in code there. Everybody sees that? Okay? All right, so we'll take a break here and we'll come back. Any other questions before we break? Yes?
Is it safe to say, like, if like we're asked for like what you want from the controller, is it safe to say
For what?
For line 44.
Line 44.
Safe to say that makes that view controller the initial view controller.
Yes, the initial view controller. Yes, that's definitely what Greg was pointing out earlier. It makes it that initial view controller, right? When we take that entry point arrow in storyboard, we're making it that initial view controller. This is the first one you see. Cool? Yes?
Can you remind, please, what the difference between having just a view controller versus having a view controller with embedded communication controller?
Oh, what's the difference, right?
Yeah.
Well, we see it visually.
No, visually, yes, but in code, like in like functionality.
You have the nav bar. You could put things in there. You could put the UI bar button in there. You could give it a title. It becomes more functional. It could push views onto the stack. A view controller cannot push a view onto its stack. It could present.
So it's kind of like more functionality.
Yes, as far as like your UI, if that's what you want, right? So not just a nav bar, but you have the ability now to push views onto the stack, pop views, have a title, and those things.
Can we embed it later? Like it's created just a controller and after that decided to change.
Yeah, you can. You could have a view controller as the entry point, go into a navigation controller.
But it will be the second view controller.
Yeah.
No, I mean just like when you create.
The first one is a basic view controller.
No, but you later decided to embed it. You can like embed it at any time, correct?
Yes, you can. You can. You can. All those are good questions. Cool? Okay. Any other questions before we break? Okay, awesome. So we'll take a short break and we'll come back.